All right, I have an idea and I'm going to try and make it, and I want to show you my thought process as I go through it, talk about how I did it. Now, this is a jig that I'm making for my shop, specifically for my bench topper. Now, this is a piece that sits on top of the bench with the Microjig grooves. It allows me to do a whole lot of things. And what I want to do is I want to make a fold down Tracksaw setup that will set this up exactly on these tracks so I can cut exactly between two of the tracks, because I have this 20-inch wide, 8-foot long panel that I need to cut down into 6 14 or 15 and a half inch wide panels. So the easiest way to do it is going to be with a Tracksaw. And I came up with an idea to make a fold down piece using this piece of plywood, this cutoff that I just did and tested, and I have these 3D printed pieces that I made a long time ago that are just sitting here. I've been using them, and a couple of bolts. So we're going to see how this goes. Now, this idea of the folding Tracksaw thing isn't necessarily a new idea, but I've never seen one attached to a Microjig bench topper like mine. This is a temporary setup so I can have those grooves whenever I need them. After clamping it in place on my bench top, I got to work on the board. Now, this piece was 15.5 by 8, so I marked it at about 7.5 and cut it into 2 different sections. I wanted a longer section for the front and a top section that's a little bit smaller. Thankfully, I've got a ton of crap, so I went and just found some T-hinges I had. Now, like I said, I don't actually know what I'm doing, so the first part here is me just trying the hinges to see if that idea is going to hold water, and once I figure that out, the next is to lay out the track on the top board. So I'm figuring out where the track is going to go, where the edge is, and where I'm going to put that scrap piece of wood that I showed earlier, because the idea is that that has a T-shape that'll fit into the slot on the bottom of the track. So my thinking is that by using that, I can slide the track on and off, and if I have it perfectly lined up, it'll be straight to the bottom of the hinge and the bottom of that front board and the side. The 3D printed part is going to go into the side there and allow me to bolt it into place. So you can see I'm just figuring out there. It slides in. And there I noticed that it sticks a little bit, so I'm going to sand down just a little bit. One of the things I wish I had done differently is a slightly longer T on that piece so it sticks up more above the metal, and I'll talk about that why later. All right, so the first thing here, I'm cutting off the top part of that where it's sticking. I want to make sure that it slides freely, and I want to cut it to the length of that top piece. Once I have it cut, I'm going to attach it. So I decided to use that old 3-part method in order to hold it in place. First part here is to make sure that it's lined up. The second part is going to be to apply glue and then CA glue. So I'm using Boss Dog glue. Gonna spread that thin because the issue is I don't want it to spread out into the grooves. I recognize that could be a problem. And then the other issue here is I only had thin CA glue, which is really not good enough. But I held it in place long enough for it to dry a little bit, and then I checked to make sure everything was lined up. The next thing I want to do is drill holes and then countersink them to make sure that the screw heads don't interrupt or don't get in the way of the track. So when I put that on, I want to make sure that it can slide in easily. Anything that's going to mess that up is going to be an issue. I just cut out a bunch of me screwing around. The next step, once I got that top one in, is to make sure that it stayed lined up, and I'm going to do the next 2 holes. Honestly, I think one of the biggest parts about doing this whole project was lining up and again lining up and making sure everything was measured well. So once I did that, here's where I ran into issues. Number one, I tried to put this on, and I did have some glue squeeze out along the side. So you can see I'm having problems putting that on there, and it really got stuck. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is clean out along the edges to try and slide it better. Used a chisel, used a couple different things. I sanded there along the edges. Basically anything I could think of to clean out the grooves. One of the things I decided to do too was to use a chisel to cut a chamfer on the front so it would slide in a little bit easier. So this is also where I realized one of the problems with this. I should have made that piece a little bit taller. One of the problems, you can see those black lines on the board. That's from the anti-slip pads on the bottom of the track. So as I slide that on, it's compressing it a little bit too much. It works. I just wish I had done a little bit taller than I had. All right, so my next thought here is how am I going to keep this piece from sliding and keep it in place after I've put it down? So I decided to use those little plastic pieces I showed earlier. They have spaces for nuts to fit in them. Again, I 3D printed this a while ago. It was for a different idea, but I had these. You could also do this with a board. You could just bolt it straight through. I wanted something that would be lined up and easy to remove, so that's why I'm doing this. I actually used a nail set to mark where the holes are going to be, and because the track is aluminum, I was able to drill through it into the piece underneath, and then once I got that off, again, I was able to drill through that to mark where the bolts were going to go. So like anything else, there were good things and bad things here. The good thing obviously is the holes were perfect, everything lined up. The bad thing is that I should have really checked this plastic piece beforehand, because I forgot that when I printed it, I elongated the shape that I had and changed the spacing for the nuts. So they won't actually fit in there. And I had to come up with an alternative way to do it. So as I was standing there noodling through how to get those in place, I remembered that people use heat to inset stuff into plastic for 3D printing. So I remembered that I had a butane torch and I decided to try and heat it up. First time I did it with the needle nose pliers did not work. So then I just put the bolt into the nut and heated it up that way. I heated it up enough that the bolt did not get hot and burn my fingers, and enough that I could put that in place. It took me a couple of tries, and I know that I don't need to show you all the tries, but I'm showing because I want you to recognize this was not a one and done thing. It took me a couple minutes to figure it out. All right, so here's the first one. It's all done. I heated it up and then I hit it with the hammer and pushed it in place. If I could do it again, I would do what I did with the second one. For this one, I put the bolt through and then threaded the nut on there. And then I heated the nut and just drilled it tight and pulled it tight in there. I had to sand the sides a little bit because that caused it to bulge out a little bit, but it definitely pulled it down much easier. All right, now that I have the nuts inserted in the plastic, I'm going to move on to that front component that's going to go against the Microjig MatchFit system. So I'm going to put that base on that we just finished up. I'm just going to put it on temporarily, and I'm going to hold that base in place. Now I want to mark the side so I know where to cut off. But I also need to mark where the grooves are because I have to drill holes for the Microjig system for the pieces to go through, and I need to make sure that everything's lined up. So I did it. I checked it. I saw that my markings were off a little bit. So I went back and checked again and then checked again because I really don't want to mess this up and have the measurements be wrong. So I checked, had to mark again, put it up and checked again, and it was still wrong. So I marked a third time. I don't know. I don't know what I was doing. Like I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying it out. So right now I'm marking where I want to drill the holes, but I'm checking after I did it just to see if I like where the holes were, and I didn't. So I changed, I think I did 2.5 inches up on the sides and then right in the middle for that third one. So on the right-hand side. These are the pieces I'm going to use. These are the Microjig MatchFit thumb screws. I decided to use that instead of clamps because this is more of a removable component. I can get it there and it'll be out of the way of the track. Now, one big suggestion I have for you, anytime you're doing something like this, drill a practice hole before you drill your actual hole just to make sure that the screws are going to fit through. That's what I did beforehand and they fit perfectly. I like that. Now, you may be asking why I did 3 holes instead of 4, why I'm trying to do it like that, or instead of 2. I did 3 because the 2 on the left-hand side are lined up, and that's going to help keep it straight, and then the one on the right-hand side will help also tighten it. So I didn't want to do too many because that's, more work, but 2 wouldn't have been enough to really make sure it was straight. Now, this is the interesting part. This is the part figuring out where the hinges go. Again, I'm just eyeballing it. This looks like a good space. It's out of the way of the saw and it's not going to run into the clamps too much. That's what was important here. All right, so as I'm moving pieces back and forth here, I'm actually trying to figure out how best to set this up. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was doing it is that I have to watch out for where the track is because I want it to line up over one of those dovetail grooves. So what I wound up doing was lining up the outside of that top part where the track is going to be with the line for that thumb screw, the single one on the right-hand side. That way I knew that it would be in line with that groove on the top and I wouldn't cut into the board because that's what I'm trying to avoid, is cutting into the bench topper. So for all the holes that I'm doing, I'm going to use a VIX bit, a self-centering bit, because I want to make sure that when I put the screws in, the hinges don't move. So this way I can make sure that they're perfectly centered. I'm using the top portion as a backer to make sure I go exactly where I'm supposed to be. And once I have all those screws in place, I'm going to just check to make sure I didn't go through. Now, there's a line that I drew earlier. That's the edge of the Tracksaw. I decided I'm going to go a little bit wider than it, but I'm going to take that part off so it all lines up pretty nicely and I don't have this big overhang. So now comes the fun part. We got to put these two pieces together and I want to make sure that I do it right. So obviously I'm, holding them together and checking it out. The other thing I'm checking to see is how it folds up over top. I decided that what I want to do is have a little bit of a lip. So when it folds down, that lip will sit on top of the bench topper. I don't know if I need it or not. I could have done it so it folds down farther, but it just seemed to make sense to me. Most stuff I'll be cutting is 3/4 of an inch or more. So I put it all together. Again, I used that VIX bit. Here's the whole piece all together. And when I put it on there, I was so confused. I thought I messed everything up. I couldn't figure out what I did wrong. But then I realized I just put it wrong on the bench topper. And once I put the track in place, once I slid it in there, obviously it's set up perfectly exactly the way that I want it. And once I got the holes lined up, I was able to put that little plastic piece in with the bolts in it and bolt it from the back. Now what I did is I drilled down a little bit to make it flush, thinking that I would need to have it flush because of when it opened, but I forgot that there are going to be bolts or thumb screws there. So anyway, it worked. It looks nice. It looks better that way. I used a 1-inch screw all the way through. And here's another stupid little dumb mistake. I put the dovetail clamps on the wrong side. They actually go on the outside. I don't know what I was thinking. And then once I fixed that, I just slid it in place. It slides right up the two middle ones. Those are 4 inches apart, and it folds down over top that groove exactly the way I want it. Tighten it down, and now I'm good to go. This honestly is just amazing to me. It was a lot of fun to make this. I made some stupid mistakes throughout, but it was a lot of fun to do this and figure it out. So now obviously this is the first cut with this setup. So let's talk about a couple other things real quick. Why didn't I do this with a table saw sled? The biggest issue with trying to do it that way is that most sleds aren't 20 inches wide to allow me to get that in there and get that cut, but also the fact that it's 8 foot long, that makes it really unwieldy on a table saw. It's going to be dangerous. The other important thing here is that I want to have this set up for various different things, and I've wanted to set this up. I could not do it on my workbench in the back, so I just made this workbench extension recently. It comes on my table and off the table, so this is an easy way for me to set it up. The other really cool thing here that was unexpected is that that 8-foot board goes over the rail, the front rail of my table saw, so it actually supports it. So I can go 8 foot, 10 feet long. This is really going to be helpful because now I don't have to set up a set of sawhorses somewhere where I cut off a piece and one piece falls and gets damaged. I'm going to have both sides of the cut equally supported, less chance of binding, less chance of any issues, and I'm really close to my dust collection for my Surf Prep vacuum, so I can easily clean up the area and make clean cuts. So I really didn't know what I was doing. I think the two things I would like to do differently is find a slightly better way to line this up at the edge. So I know that I'm getting a really good straight cut. I know that I'm 90 degrees this way. So I need to get something going this way to help me line it up to make sure everything stays straight. But I'm very impressed with how easy this is to set up. I'll be able to take this off the bench and put it back on pretty easily. I made some cuts underneath to allow the clamps in the back to get out of the way. And so I can open this up all the way and have it stay up while I reset for the next cut. So listen, I just wanted to walk you through the steps to think through and trial something. I know this is easy for some people. Other people don't feel confident in themselves. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what they're doing. So this was an easy way to set it up and for me to show you how to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second one.
There's something else out here.